You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is January 12th, 2025, and this is episode 306 of Lighthearted. I want to wish everyone a very happy new year. Today we have two segments. First, a conversation with a former lighthouse keeper in the UK, followed by a special Be a Lighthouse segment, where we'll discuss a special community program of the Kennebunk Police Department in Maine. I'm flying solo today with no co-host, and I want to get right into our first segment. Our guest, Peter Halil, was a lighthouse keeper in the UK from 1974 to 1997. He was among the last traditional lighthouse keepers in the UK before all the lights were automated. He was stationed at some well-known light stations in England and Wales, including South Bishop, St. Catherine's, Bishop Rock, the Lizard, and several others. During his final years as a keeper, he visited as many lighthouses as possible before they were automated. He shot video at the lighthouses, including walkthroughs, footage of the keepers at work, and, when possible, interviews with keepers. In recent years, he's gone back and edited the videos and posted them on his YouTube channel, which you can access at youtube.com/@Peter Halil. Again, youtube.com/ the @ Peter Halil. His last name is Halil. Peter and I spoke recently using Zoom, and the conversation covered a lot of topics, including his experiences at the various lighthouses where he served as keeper, as well as how he got started recording videos of the lighthouses for posterity. This is part one of a two-part interview. We'll hear part two in episode 307 on January 26th. So let's listen to part one of my conversation with Peter Halil now. I am speaking today with Peter Halil in England. And Peter is a former lighthouse keeper in the UK and also has one of the best lighthouse-related YouTube channels, if not the best in the world, I would say. It's incredible. So, Peter, thanks so much for doing this today.
You're welcome.
So how did you come to be a lighthouse keeper in the first place?
Ooh. I was in the Navy first, straight from school, and that didn't go too brill. And I stuck out 8 years of the Royal Navy. Most of the time it was enjoyable. I worked on a couple of aircraft carriers on the flight deck, so that was enjoyable. And I saw a lot of the world. Then I left the Navy under the instigation of the first wife, and I couldn't find a job. It was trying to find a job. I don't know whether it was the wrong time to look or what. In the end, I ended up as just filling in as a milkman. I don't know if you have them in America.
We did.
Basically, it was just driving a van with all the milk loading on the back and delivering it to people's houses.
Yeah.
But by then I was living in Suffolk over in East Anglia. I was born, by the way, in London, in the East End. Technically, I'm a Cockney, but I left sort of 8 or 9 years old and moved to Suffolk. Then, after leaving the Navy, driving this truck around East Anglia with all this milk on, it wasn't just up and down in streets, it was all over the countryside, miles and miles, delivering to farms, really. And at the end of the day, you're just so shattered. You know, I'd fall asleep anywhere when I got home. And I got home one day and I fell asleep on the floor in front of the fire. When I woke up, the telly was on and there was a documentary on lighthouses. And I just got engrossed with it and I thought, oh, that's a nice job. I'll have a go, see if I can try that. So I sort of found an address and a phone number, and the rest is history, I think.
Yeah. Funny how a little thing can make such a difference, just a chance happening like that. I remember we had milk trucks in this country. I don't think we do anymore, but that must have been in the days when the milk was all in glass bottles and there'd be a lot of clinking of the bottles and you're carrying them around and that kind of thing.
I don't think we've got them anymore. It's all plastic now and from supermarkets, isn't it? But
exactly. Yeah. So when you started out as a lighthouse keeper for Trinity House, which of course I'm sure a lot of our listeners know is the authority for lighthouses in the UK, what kind of training did you get starting out?
Right, there was two training schools. One was Harwich in Essex, and the other was Blackwall in London. I went to the Blackwall in London one, and it's down on the docks. And you go, well, I went there for a month. That's the normal training. You should go there and have training in all sorts of stuff like, light maintenance on engines, all electrics and stuff. You're supposed to learn the Morse code, knots, and all sorts of stuff you'd never use anywhere else, basically, and how the lights work and all the different things. But when I arrived in London for the training, it was the lighthouses were going through sort of automation, all the ones out to sea then, to come out of the oil lamp era and into electrification. The depot where I went to train in Blackwall was also doing the same. So I should have had training on the light, but it was basically everything I should have been trained on. They gave you a film instead to watch of what it, would be like. And in fact, we're supposed to do a fair bit of cooking to learn how to bake a loaf of bread and stuff like that. Just basic, learning how to feed yourself. And even that wasn't available. So once I left there, you get sent. Then you're classed as a supernumerary assistant keeper. Sounds like you should have a big S on your chest and wear a cape. And you're basically being used and abused and here, there, and everywhere to fill in all the gaps. And you learn different bits from different lighthouses. And it's learning, more or less in the deep end, which is probably the better way of doing it.
Right. So it sounds like it was mostly learning on the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And each lighthouse, although similar, are different in lots of respects.
Sure.
Like you'll get some lighthouses, you have engine rooms that look like you've just entered a Frankenstein film with all the levers and dials and great big flywheels going round. And then you've got places like the Lizard, where I was at one stage and ended my career in the Lizard. That one, you got all these levers and dials and engines to make the foghorn make a noise. There's about 20 or 30 things you go through before you even get the note out of the horn. Yeah, to start with, when I was doing that, I used to have what I called my idiot book. I had a little notebook. So the boss that was showing me around, the principal keeper, normally I would go through it bit by bit and write it down, idiot fashion. Number one, do this. Number two, do that. And that's how I got by till I'd learned, different things off by heart. But
I'm picturing a book, Lighthouse Keeping for Dummies. You have that series of books where there's different things for dummies. Yeah. Maybe you should.
Turn the first 3 blue valves on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would need that kind of thing too.
With some of the foghorns, some you just press a button. Others, it's like the Lizard. In fact, there's a couple of videos on my channel. One with my boss then doing the foghorn, and then there's another one with me doing it. And we do it slightly differently, but it still works. And it's just because it's so many dials and levers, and you've got to do more or less in the right order.
Yeah.
And things like the engine, you got to wind in the clutch and then feel that the clutch is in properly. If it's too tight or too loose, all sorts of little things.
Yeah. So by the time you were getting into lighthouse keeping in the mid-1970s, was everything there electrified? It was all running on electricity, the lights and fog signals and everything, or no?
Wherever I went, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There was some still at sea, I think, that might have lingered a bit. But I think, mostly must have been automatic. Not automatic. They must have been electrified by then. Because when I went to do different duties at different places, I never saw another or any oil light at all. In fact, to try and get a video of an oil light, I eventually blagged my way into the Bahamas tourist board, giving me a ride out to the Bahamas because they reckon they've got the last kerosene stroke oil fired
Yep.
hand wound lighthouse in the world. So
And they still do. They had a lot of damage in a hurricane a couple of years ago, but I guess things
yeah,
are back to
I,
normal. Yeah.
yeah, I was trying to talk them into doing something that I don't think they ever did, and I thought it would be a wonderful way of making a little bit of money and keeping quite a lot of lighthouse enthusiasts happy, and that was to run like a school for train you how to be a lighthouse keeper with an oil light. And
Mm.
you go there for say a week, and you go around with a keeper, and it
Hmm.
ends up with you doing a proper watch, doing the light yourself, and
Hmm.
getting a certificate. And
Yeah.
I was putting that to the tourist board, but it never went anywhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is a shame.
It is. Yeah. Well, I know somebody there. Maybe we can talk about it
Yeah,
another time. But yeah, I haven't been there. I'd love to see that in person.
yeah.
But anyway, so your first place where you were stationed, was it South Bishop in Wales? Uh,
It's I don't know how many miles out to sea, but it's a few miles out to sea off the Welsh coast,
mm-hmm.
and it's like a big lump of rock, almost shaped like a turtle or half a circle. And on the top is perched the lighthouse and the dwellings. The lighthouse sort of comes out of the middle of the dwellings. By then, most places were helicopter reliefs.
Mm-hmm.
This one had a helipad on the top of the rock, but there was still obviously the where you could land by boat, because sometimes we had stuff delivered by boat, but not very often.
Yeah. And were you on there for something like 28 days at a time, or how did
Yeah,
that work?
month on, month off. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Was
yeah.
it must have been kind of a shock. Uh,
Well, I enjoyed it. I don't know. I've always enjoyed my own company anyway, but it doesn't mean I shun away from crowds or anything. Yeah, the I suppose the shock bit was getting back into some sort of routine. I suppose the Navy trained me for that, a routine. But yeah, the hardest bit I think about being away is you're away from your wife and your family, and you're with two guys you don't know,
hmm.
and you didn't choose them. So
Yeah.
and yeah, and you got to make friends. So, and once you get into the routine, it's amazing how quick the time goes. 28 days.
Yeah.
I found I enjoyed it,
Uh-huh.
and
So,
lots of people don't.
you're right. That's not for everybody, that's for sure.
No,
Or it wasn't for everybody. So you did mention, being there with two other guys that you didn't pick. I imagine there were times in your career as a lighthouse keeper when you wish you could have picked somebody else. Uh,
I actually asked to be moved at once from one station because of what we delicately class as a clash of personalities. But yeah, but that's the only time it ever happened.
yeah.
And later on in life, later on, I actually met the guy again at a different lighthouse, and we were the best of pals then. So, it
Hmm.
just one of those things at the time, I guess.
Yeah. I remember interviewing another keeper who said exactly the same thing. They didn't get along with somebody, then they met years later and
Yeah,
got along great. Yeah.
it's amazing. Like I got one of my journals next to me, and I was writing diligently down for about 5 years, and I put all my feelings at the time. Like I state at the beginning of the month, you say how wonderful these other two are, really great and all the rest of it. And by the end of the month, I'm picking them to pieces about how they breathe or eat with their mouth open. And, it's as I was saying, it's the little things that get you, nothing big.
Yeah.
Nobody picks an argument and wants a fight on a lighthouse. It's tiny little, the little things, a bit like being married, I guess. You got
I was
little
thinking the same
things
thing. Yeah.
that niggle it. Yeah.
So we don't have time to talk about all your stations, obviously, where you were a keeper. But I just wanted to talk about a couple. Dungeness Lighthouse in Romney Marsh on the
Yeah.
southeast coast. I got to visit there a couple of years ago when I was in England. So you got the old lighthouse that's very, very old and kind of a tourist destination. People go there to see that.
Yeah.
But you were taking care of the new lighthouse, which is kind of, I don't know, maybe to put it nicely, nondescript. But
Yeah. It's just like a pencil with a light on the top, and
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
not yeah.
And you were telling me we were talking the other day that maybe it wasn't, you didn't feel that it was as well built as some of the old lighthouses.
Definitely not. The ones out to sea, the Victorian lighthouses that are still standing with all these storms going on,
Hmm.
in those, although they shudder a bit and tremble, you feel safe in those. They're over-engineered by Victorian engineers, made out of granite. But the Dungeness one, it's um, it's a bit like how they made these drains out of concrete, uh, big rings of concrete, stressed concrete, and they put steel rods through it to hold each section together.
Hmm.
And that went up bit by bit. And then they slapped the lantern and the lens on at the top. So it wasn't very thick. And as I was saying the other day, I discovered that when you go up to the top of Lighthouse, you can grab hold of the handrail at the top in by the lens, and by a quick jerk in motion of pulling yourself backwards, you can set the tower trembling.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I don't think I could do that with a Victorian granite one. No way. Yeah,
Mm.
it didn't feel terrifically safe to me. And in
Was-
fact, it's a wonder it's still standing in my eyes.
Yeah.
But obviously it was built properly, but it
Yeah.
just didn't feel right.
When I visited there, it was like the new lighthouse was sort of just like an eyesore, and the I'm trying to photograph the old lighthouse, and let's get that other thing out of the way. But
And next to the old lighthouse, there's a roundhouse, which is the base of an even older lighthouse. And I lived in one of the there's a three dwellings in there. That's where I lived with the
okay,
first missus.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm remembering that now. I'd
yeah.
forgotten about that unusual.
Rooms, rooms shaped like wedges of cheese.
Oh, yeah, I know it's coming back to me now. That very unusual building next to the lighthouse there.
Yeah,
There's also the miniature railroad that
yeah, that's lovely.
terminates there, which I got to ride, which was
Yeah,
really, really cool. And you were at St. Catherine's Lighthouse on
yeah,
the
yeah,
Isle of Wight for a few years. Is that correct?
yeah. That's correct. And I also I don't know how I found the keeper, an old keeper, Sid Squibb, and he lived on the island.
Hmm.
And he was there when the place was bombed during the war. Well, not actually there at the time. He came along shortly after the bombing or something. Yeah, it was. I like the old boys talking to them, the ones who did the so-called proper lighthouse keeping with the lights and on and off by the winch and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Boat reliefs.
I know a woman named Connie Small who wrote a book called The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife. She and her husband lived at lighthouses in New England
Yeah.
for about 30 years, and she lived to be 103. But I interviewed her, and I remember she said that the Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse, when they came to it, had just been electrified. The first time they had experienced electricity in 1946. And she said they were excited to have electricity, but she said just to push a button, that was nothing. It felt like something was wrong. They were so used to putting so
Yeah.
much of themselves into lighting that light. Suddenly, it
Yeah.
did. They weren't putting themselves into it anymore. So it was a big change for keepers, uh,
Yeah.
for sure. And after St. Catherine's, you were at the Holy. Do you pronounce it Holyhead, or is there another pronunciation?
We call it Holyhead.
Holyhead.
Yeah, it's actually spelt Holyhead,
Right,
but
Holyhead. That sounds,
everything gets,
yeah.
rounded down to whatever.
Holyhead Control Center in
Yeah,
Wales.
yeah. I suppose I liked it because I had lots of time at home. Because me and the second wife, who's still here after 42 years, we decided we weren't going to go down the road of being in Trinity House property because we envisaged that you don't really have a house as such. And at some point they'll move you and you have to uplift and go everywhere. So we bought a house in Wales on Anglesey where Holyhead is. And because that was the only place we could afford at the time as well. And we've been here ever since. Yeah, it was one of those times where we just fought ahead. And luckily, when it came to the redundancy, a lot of keepers had nothing to go to, whereas we had already bought our house and we were doing month on, month off at different places. And that was fine. And the Holyhead depot covered several years. But the only thing wrong with it, in my mind, was you started to be then more of a watching stuff on a computer. You weren't in a lighthouse. It was the old Trinity House depot,
Mm-hmm.
and they used us as guinea pigs, really, because the sort of monitoring lighthouses and working them from a distance was in its infancy. So they give you a few lighthouses close to you to monitor down the telephone lines, and then one or two further and further away to sort of see if it would work.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to get alarms after alarms, constant things to start with. Yeah, that was quite harrowing to start with.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was. But eventually, when everything got ironed out, all the faults, and they got better technology, once they get it all going perfectly, that's when we all, they hurried on with the automation, and that's when the keepers got the golden boot.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Is there a pier head light right there by the control center? Do I have that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Holyhead breakwater, they call it. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and that was actually manned at one stage, but not when I joined.
Yeah.
And I found a few keepers, to talk about their time on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So again, you were a keeper at a few other places too, and I want to get into some other things, but before we do that, anything else that we haven't mentioned as far as I mean, there's a lot of things, of course, but something that comes to mind when you think of your lighthouse keeping career, any other places that we haven't mentioned that really, really stand out for you?
When I'd finished my training as a keeper, before I got appointed to South Bishop, because you have to be appointed to a station to, do. When you're a supernumerary, they send you here, there, and everywhere. Anyway, I rolled up at this lighthouse on the land in Norfolk, and I was supposed to be there for a few weeks training to learn the ropes, as it were. And I just got out of the taxi. I got all my food and stuff with me and clothing, and then just said goodbye to the taxi driver. And he was rolling off down the road, and I looked up to see the PK running out of the house, and he came over to me and he waving his arms, and he says, "You're not staying. We've had a phone call from Trinity House. They need you on the Longstone up in Northumberland." So I'm in the middle of nowhere, as it were, one of these sidelines that you have to go back down through London to be able to go anywhere in Britain. And so I then have to organize myself, get another taxi, get to the train station and try and find my way back to London and then up to Northumberland. This is how Trinity used to treat us. And I get to Northumberland and then you have to find digs. And then I find the other keeper who's going on and he helps me. And then you go out on a boat to the Longstone the next morning. and the long stone is where Grace Darling did a famous row from to rescue all these people from a wreck.
Yeah.
So that place was kind of special. It was the first real lighthouse in my mind that I went to, and it was spooky and nice all in one go. It was, if you look at it from above, it's shaped like a bit like a castle, but in the like a figure of eight. And on the left-hand side, you would have all the dwellings where you lived, and then you had a courtyard, and then on the other side was the lighthouse and the engine room. You had to go in through the engine room and then up a spiral staircase to the top.
Yeah.
And the spiral staircase was always semi-darkness, very gloomy. So as a young green keeper, that was very spooky indeed. And on the way up, you'd pass what was Grace Darling's old bedroom, or the room where they used to live as a family.
Yeah.
And every time in the middle of the night that I'd pass this doorway, the door would be open and the light inside would be on. So I'd put my hand round the door jamb, click the light off, pull the door shut, make sure it was shut properly and clicked, go up, do your business with the light and all the rest of it, check on it, come down, doors open, the light's back on. And that happened all the time. So that was, a bit, made the old heart flutter a bit. But
Wow.
and the only other thing that was a bit dodgy as well was they wanted the weather every so many hours there. And once a day in the early hours of the morning, you had to do the sea temperature. And that involved, a big thermometer on the end of a rope that you had to walk outside the building down this path to the edge of where the jetty was and throw this thermometer end into the sea and wait so many minutes and then pull it out and check the temperature. That was fine some of the time, but I was there in winter time, and it was lots of seals there live on the island, and they pull themselves up. And the nice place they want to sleep is on the path you're walking down in the dark. And you don't want to wake one of those up when you're trying to step over it or around it. Yeah.
That is really funny because I got to go to Longstone in 2017 with the U.S. Lighthouse
Yeah.
Society tour, and it's an amazing place. I loved it.
Yeah,
And there
gorgeous.
was a seal on the path to the lighthouse. There
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
seal there right next to the path. And when we went past it, it sounded like I was crying. It sounded like a baby crying. And we
Yeah.
had a young woman on the tour who, while the rest of us went to the lighthouse, she sat with the seal and she said, like, your mama will come back. It'll be okay. But I
Yeah,
got some great close pictures of that seal. So that's
yeah,
funny. But
yeah.
what a amazing place that is.
It is lovely, yeah. Full of wildlife, yeah.
Uh-huh. But I mean
Mm.
the buildings are pretty spectacular. So
Yeah.
but I wasn't going to ask you about ghost stories, this ghost story type stuff, but I'm glad you brought that up because it's part of the fabric of a lot of these places.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's a few around, but that's the only thing I can physically remember.
yeah.
Never saw anything. Other keepers, because there was a place further down on the same coast, Coquette, and that was
Hmm.
built on the grounds of an old monastery.
Yeah, we
And
got off
so,
there. We get to walk around there too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's stories there going about ghostly monks and stuff. But I asked a few keepers that live, were stationed there, and a few of them, refused point blank to talk about what they saw.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, it's an interesting subject, and I always say I'm an open-minded skeptic. You can't believe
yeah,
everything, but there's
me too. Yeah,
there's something going on with a lot of the
there, there
cases for sure.
was there was one there that wasn't exactly a ghost story. Some chap came onto the. Oh, that was it. He was coming out of the building to go and do something outside. One of the keepers.
Hmm.
And then when he'd done whatever it was outside, he then had to go back to some sort of engine room or some doorway that led into underneath the lighthouse. And as he opened the door, there was a monk coming towards him in full monk gear, and he absolutely screamed and nearly messed his pants. And once everything calmed down, they turned out it was actually a real monk that had come on the island with a group that they didn't know about to do whatever monks do, visiting an island. And he opened this door and walked in, and it shut behind him, and he was in the dark trying to fumble around, and it was just coincidental that
Yeah,
as he got to the door to try and get out,
that's pretty
the
funny.
keeper opened the door, and there was a monk.
That is hilarious.
That
Yeah, there
was
are often other explanations, but
yeah,
I don't think there always are. So it's very
yeah,
interesting. But that's a great story. So you've said already that 1997, your career as a lighthouse keeper ended, and that's when it was pretty much ending in the UK with automation.
yeah, yeah. I
Um,
was one of the last.
yeah.
I'm not the last, but I always used to say I was down to about the last 30s, but it was less than that. We were in
Hmm.
the 20s when I got the boot. But
You're like an endangered species.
yeah, the last of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, yeah. So what are your general feelings about lighthouse automation?
I didn't like it, obviously, because it was a dream job to me. I loved it.
Hmm.
So I would still be doing it now in my 70s. But yeah, and there was lots of nastiness towards the end, you know, keepers sniping at each other. Because Trinity House put around this story that there was going to be few keepers' jobs left at the end. They wanted a team of keepers, just a few, to go around to do husbandry in all of these automated lighthouses, give them some TLC, and then move on to the next one, and so on. That was the story they were telling, but so because that job was being bandied around, everybody was either kissing backside, as they say, or trying to stab each other in the back. It seemed at the end, it was nasty at times, and in fact, uh, we went on before we got the royal boot. We went on one of these seminars to what to do when you're made redundant and all this lot, and how to fill out a CV for a new job. And while we were there was I don't know if it was just me from Holyhead. I think it was from the centre, and others were from other lighthouses. And I got accused of being one of the ones that hastened on the end of the lighthouse keeper. And I said, pardon? And it was the fact that because I worked in the control centre and helped make all
Oh,
this work, that's what. And I said, a load of rubbish, we were all going anyway. It was
yeah.
just, but that's how it was at the end. What was a dream job, obviously it didn't all end like that. It was just a few people felt that way, but
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
so it was nice in amongst all that to go on a lighthouse at Christmas with Ralph Humphreys and uh, Jerry Douglas Sherwood. We had a wonderful time. It was
that
yeah,
was the Needles.
yeah, the Needles,
So that was 97, that Christmas there.
yeah, something
So,
like that. Yeah,
so you're
I
sort
think it
of
was.
celebrating or commemorating the end of lighthouse
Uh,
keeping at that.
it was one of those things I wanted to do
Hmm.
because I'd heard that nobody had recorded Christmas on a lighthouse. I think I've seen a video of somebody did since then, of like his own personal, doing the Christmas dinner and all the rest of it, but not like the one we ended up with, the full thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I just wanted to record Christmas on a lighthouse, and I asked specially to go, and Trinity House at that time were trying to help me as best they could.
Hmm.
And when I asked the first time, they said, no, we can't justify the cost of sending you. And I thought, well, I'll just go in place of somebody. And oh no, that wasn't on either. So that was out of the window. And then long before that, I was on there with this one keeper who kept saying he was not going to be there for Christmas. No way am I going to be working at Christmas. And lo and behold, he suddenly went ill at Christmas, and they phoned me up and asked if I would go. So I did.
Mm-hmm.
So it was. I'm almost tempted to say bittersweet because I had to go and leave the wife and the kids at home, so you miss that bit. But I have a wife who backs me up, so she was quite happy for me to. That sounds even worse. But yeah, she was
Happy
quite
for you
happy.
to be away for Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it was magic time.
Yeah. It just made me
Yeah.
my own wife is sort of glad when I'm away doing lighthouse trips for sometimes a week or two at a time because she can get stuff done at home that she can't do otherwise.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
lucky. She likes her own space. I like my own space.
Mm-hmm.
So month on, month off was great, So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Sure. So to back up a little bit, when, how, and why did you start visiting lighthouses to take video and interview keepers and that sort of thing?
Ooh, grief. I think it was like in a rage that I could see Trinity House rushing around. It's that we knew automation was coming bit by bit, but suddenly it seemed to snowball and pick up speed or pick up pace. And they were rushing around doing this and doing that, and nobody seemed interested in preserving anything of the keepers. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, when I was at the depot, when they actually closed the depot in Holyhead and turned it into the control centre, the depot staff that were there before us, they had a big skip and they were burning all sorts of documents, getting rid of it all. And I was thinking, grief, you don't burn stuff like that. That's historical. But no, it was all going up in flames. And I could see the same sort of mentality with Trinity House of just, automate and rip everything out, put new in, and nobody interested in preserving anything, it seemed, other
Mm-hmm.
than a few, like Jerry Douglas and people like that with the Association of Lighthouse Keepers stuff. But yeah, so I thought, well, I'll have a go then. So I asked permission and they were, all for it because we had some decent bods in Trinity House then. The public relations guy, I think, was Howard Cooper. And he was, very good. Then I had to hock myself up in, with the never, never, as they say, to buy a video camera. It was in those days, a video camera was like £1,000, and £1,000 to me was, like the end of the world. But so I had to do hire purchase,
Yeah.
and the first video camera wasn't very good anyway. It wasn't till I got a Sony many years later. It's got a bit better, but
Yeah.
and I had to teach myself how to use it. And I've always been into films and stuff and watching films, avid film watcher.
Me
So I
too.
know how a film runs and I know what I like and what I don't like. And I've seen hundreds of people's holiday films where you feel almost like you want to be violently seasick or whatever because they're whizzing round. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew I had to slow everything down for panning and, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. It started off small, just doing bits here and there,
Yeah.
and then Trinity House helped with using me on my month off from the Holyhead Control Centre to be used and abused almost as filling in for people out at sea. And I'd say, I haven't been on this lighthouse or this lighthouse, so you got enough in there? And then they'd wangle it, so I would go there instead of, And so I used lots of me leave where I should have been home with the wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, that I'd do like a fortnight here and a fortnight there.
Yeah.
But occasionally I'd do a month away, a full
Yeah.
month. Yeah, it was just, as I said, it snowballed. And when I got started, I thought, well, we're not all automated yet. We're not all made redundant. So perhaps I've got a bit of time to do this and a bit of time to do that. And then I thought, oh, there's keepers and old keepers. Perhaps I can interview people. So I started doing that as well. But
Yeah.
and then I got I wrote off. In those days, there was no real internet as such. So I used to write everywhere or use the phone at the depot and, directory of inquiries. Can you tell me? Yeah, I'd got to Gibraltar. I asked if I could go there, and they okayed that to go and
Yeah.
stay there, just as a passenger, as it were, or a
Right.
tourist. And I talked to an airline that had a daily charter there that to give me a return ticket, which they did
Yeah.
happily. Because in those days, lots of these CEOs of companies were avid sailors, so they're quite happy to help us, a
Mm.
lighthouse keeper.
Hmm.
And
Just to,
the hardest one I got to was the Falklands.
yeah. Just to interrupt for a moment, just for listeners who might not know, Gibraltar is a British territory, correct? And
Yeah,
also Falkland Islands.
overseas.
So those are
Yeah,
the farthest flung lighthouse locations under Trinity
yeah.
House. Is that right?
And the Gibraltar one used to send a principal keeper out there. When I went there, all the keepers there were all from Britain. But I don't know how it. The Falklands one, yeah, the Falkland one was the one where they had the principal keeper originally from Britain, and then the two other keepers were islanders from the
Hmm.
Falklands. But eventually it went to just islanders. But they were a bit like a forgotten race over there, because we had uniforms and badges and insignia, and they had nothing. They had to wear whatever they could get hold of.
I just want to mention that people can hear a little conversation in the background. There's some noises. You have
That's
some
in,
grandchildren at
yeah,
your house today, right?
yeah.
Yeah. It makes it sound it's nice. I like hearing that.
I think that
So,
hopefully they're on their way home, but their own home. But
what format was all that video shot on? Was it
it it was on video 8, so 8 millimeter, and occasionally when I could afford it, high 8.
Oh, right,
The
I
high,
remember those now. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I was a media
like
archivist at a public TV station for a while. We dealt with all different kinds of
yeah,
formats.
little
I'd forgotten about the cassettes, right?
yeah,
Small
little
cassettes.
cassettes, yeah,
I had totally forgotten about those formats.
yeah,
So that's interesting because when you look at the videos in your YouTube channel, they have a filmic look to them.
yeah,
I was trying to figure out, is this film? Is this video? So that,
yeah.
it's not like high definition we have today,
No,
but still it has they have
no,
a nice look to them.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Some of it, like originally, like that first camera, when I went on the Hanwha and places like that,
yeah.
out to sea, because the lenses weren't very good. You had
Hmm.
trying to fit everything in a lighthouse was awful. So you ended up having to buy these screw-on add-ons,
Uh-huh.
and they ended up looking like you were you're viewing everything through the bottom of a beer barrel, beer glass or something. It
Yeah.
wasn't very brill.
Yeah. Yeah, you need a wide angle lens to record
Yeah,
inside a
and
lighthouse, but too wide angle gives you that fisheye
yeah,
look, right? Which isn't good either.
yeah,
So,
yeah. If only we had GoPros and stuff like that back then. Yeah, but
yeah, things have changed a little bit. You can
God,
shoot
yeah,
on a average cell phone, you can shoot better video than what we're doing back
yeah.
then. Yeah.
This is what I get occasionally on the YouTube channel.
Hmm.
You get some spark well, you get like weeks and weeks of being praised, and you think, oh, grief. I'm in for a fall here. I can feel it. And then you get somebody, right in and gives you a good kicking. And it's normally about, it's either about the noise or of the engine or the quality of the video and stuff like that. And you feel, do I want to go into an explanation of, we're talking nearly 30 years ago, mate. You
Yeah.
know, I did start to say that once, and in the end, I thought, no, I'll only
Right.
get into like arguments over the air. So I was going to say, if anybody now gets their pride and joy, their latest iPhone, sticks it in a drawer for 30 years, and then brings it out, and then
People will laugh
gets,
at it. Yeah.
yeah, everybody, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing with the engine noise, I get that. Oh, a lot of them say, "Oh, I couldn't do your job. It's the engines would drive me mad." And I thought, yeah, the engine is always there, the engine noise, but the camera's microphone boosts it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But also, there's the thing is, when you commute to work, you got the noise of the car, you got the noise of every other car. In work, you got the noise of whatever work you're working at. If you go by train, you got that. If you go by plane on holiday, you got the noise of that. There's
Yeah.
nowhere in this world probably where you can go without being anywhere near the noise of people, And so you go on a lighthouse and you just get one engine in the background. I think
Yeah.
that's quite a bonus.
Again, Peter's YouTube channel is at youtube.com/@Peter Halil. Again, youtube.com/ followed by the @ symbol, Peter Halil, Halil. Or you can just get onto YouTube and do a search for Peter Halil, again, Halil. I want to recommend also that everyone check out the website of the Association of Lighthouse Keepers, or ALK. The ALK provides a forum for everyone interested in lighthouses, lightships, and maritime aids to navigation. Despite its name, being a lighthouse keeper is not a requirement for joining the association. The website for the ALK is alk.org.uk. Next, we're going to have a short Be a Lighthouse segment. Our guest is Candice Simeoni, who is a police officer in Kennebunk, a beautiful community in southern Maine. I saw some articles this past holiday season about a community program Candice runs for the police department called the Golden Ornament Project. As you'll hear, it benefits local senior citizens in the holiday season. Candice is also known as the Sugar Angel, for reasons you'll hear in the interview. Let's listen to my conversation with Candice Simeoni now. I'm speaking today with Candice Simeoni from the Kennebunk, Maine Police Department. Thanks so much for speaking with me today, Candice.
Thank you for having me.
Your title with the Kennebunk Police Department is Elder Crimes / Community Liaison / Court Officer. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I'm a police officer and I have different assignments. And so those happen to be the 3 assignments that is on my title.
Yeah. So what sort of things do you do as community liaison?
So for the department, I take care of all of the community events. I focus on community policing and I have the opportunity to be out and about in the community a little bit more now versus being in a cruiser.
So let's kind of cut to the chase here. And one of the main things I want to talk with you about is the Golden Ornament Project. What is the Golden Ornament Project?
Well, it's a project that I started a few years back. So another hat that I wear is I'm the president of the York County Elder Abuse Task Force. And so as you can imagine, my passion in law enforcement is protecting our older population from crime. And because of that, I often speak to our older population in distress and some bad circumstances, and it kind of wrenches on your heart. And so I feel like the Golden Ornament Project for me is a way for me to, I guess, celebrate our older population, show them respect, embrace what they've given to us in our lives and our communities, and I give the community a chance to be part of that with me. So what I do is, I'm sure a lot of you know about the Given Trees or the Toys for Tots programs. It's a way for our younger generation to be kind of celebrated during the holidays, to give them some cheer and hope. And I always feel like our older population deserves that as well. Santa is alive and well for everybody. And what that means is that's holiday spirit and joy. And I decided that, hey, let's give this a whirl. Let's find people, older people in our community who live alone, who may have had a hard year, who lost maybe their husband or their wife. And let's kind of wrap our arms around them. And this would be a great way to do so. So I opened up nominations for other community members, other businesses, the food pantries, town halls, etc., to nominate a couple people that could use that love, I guess. And as a result, the first year I did it, which has been, I think, for about 4 years ago, we had 18 recipients, which is amazing. This year, we had over 72 recipients for the Golden Ornament Project. And I feel selfish because I get to hear the stories and the reason why they're nominated. The program is anonymous, so we don't share names with anybody. I'm basically, me and a couple of my volunteers are the ones who know the names. And we put little wishes, their age and their wishes inside little clear bulbs, Christmas bulbs. And people come in from the community and pick one of their bulbs that they want, and they fulfill the wish. And we wrap them up, and one of our officers or our volunteers go and deliver it to them, and hopes that they feel like they're being celebrated and that the community cares about them.
Yeah. Well, when I read about this, I thought it's fantastic. And I'm wondering, what kind of reactions have you gotten from both the community at large and the people who are the recipients of these good deeds?
Yeah, so I feel as though the people who come in and select a wish and fulfill them get just as much joy as the recipients themselves. And it's a very meaningful program. And what I mean by that is I never really understood the impact that it really made to a lot of people until last year. When I did this last year, I had 3 adult people in our police lobby who said they wanted to talk to the coordinator of the program. So I came out into the lobby. There was a gentleman and 2 women, and we kind of stood in silence for a couple seconds. It was kind of awkward, and then they explained their story. And their story was this: they had said to me, they all held up one bulb. They all each selected a bulb, and they said, "We just want you to know how much this project means to us." And I said, "Okay, thank you. Thank you for being part of this. This is what makes it happen. It's not me. It's the community who comes and fulfills them." And they said, "No, we have all lost our last parent this year. And one of the things we've always done together around this time is we would go have lunch together and we go shopping for our parents. And we all were really upset about the fact that we weren't going to be able to do that again this year until this project happened." And so the gentleman holds up a bulb. He's like, "Look, it's an 84-year-old man. That's how old my father is or was." And I don't know, that was like a moment where I was like, wow, that was pretty powerful. A small idea has turned into something that's like a tradition for a lot of people now. And I don't know, I hope a lot of other communities embrace it and take it on, because it's something really special. It's not on financial need. It's not on any kind of need, except for a community member selected someone who may need a little lift for the holiday season, or they live alone, etc. So it's special. It's a special program.
Can you give a specific example of one of these wishes and how it was filled?
Yeah, no, this is kind of great. I'm glad you asked that. So prior to working at the Kennebunk Police Department, I did work at another agency, a wonderful agency, and that's when I actually did the giving tray for children and families. And I noticed a lot of the children's wishes were like fun wishes, but kind of big. Kids don't know. They wanted a new electronic system or something like that. These wishes are gloves, or one woman likes a special hand cream, and she wanted some more of her hand cream. We have one request this year. They wanted Kennebunk trash bags. Here in Kennebunk, you have to pay for your trash bags. That's all they wanted. I think the most expensive, I don't even think I have the most expensive gift that was asked for or needed. It's just humble. They're humble gifts. And I think it's more about the gesture than really about what the gifts truly are.
Yeah. Oh, I completely understand what you're saying. I think it's just great, and I really hope it catches on, as you said. But before we sign off, I didn't tell you I was going to ask about something else here, but I was looking for information, and I just happened to stumble on some other very interesting information. I read that you create custom cakes, and that you're known as the Sugar Angel because you donate many of those cakes. Can you tell me how that got started?
Yeah, that's so funny too. Oh gosh, okay. Yeah, well, my mom has always been a culinary chef. She's always been amazing in the kitchen, and I kind of took that for granted. I didn't realize I had a little bit of that skill until I was working actually on the road one day, and there was a little boy's birthday who had a bad day, and so I had asked my chief, could I make a cake for him and bring it in my uniform? I wasn't really sure if he liked police officers. I actually knew he didn't really like police officers, so I'm like, this would be a really great moment.
Yeah.
And so I made the cake. It came out like really nice, and I dropped it off to him. And people call law enforcement not because they're having a great day or they're happy. It's generally they call us because they're in some bad situations. And so I don't always get those opportunities to be greeted with smiles or do something like this. And so I did it, and it made me feel amazing. So I started making more and more cakes for people just free because I'm not a professional. I just do it for fun, for friends and family. And one of the officers who I worked with was like, you've got a skill here and you really should embrace it. And I'm like, no, I'm not a professional. And lo and behold, I was entered into a contest. Buddy the Cake Boss. I don't know if you know who that is. Buddy Velasco. He's on the Food Network. Anyway,
Yeah.
They entered some of my cakes, and I won. I won his contest, so I got to go down and meet him in Staten Island, New York, and then I got contacted from an agency called Ice and Smiles that makes custom cakes for chronically and terminally ill kiddos, and I obviously couldn't say no, and so I've made at least 3 dozen of those for children in Maine and New Hampshire over the last, I'd say, I think it's about 10 years I've been doing it now, 15 maybe, actually.
Yeah.
Time is flying. So that's just it. That was my little, I guess, side tidbit that I wasn't thinking I was going to be asked about, but I guess.
Well, when I saw that, I knew I had to talk to you about that too. That's great. I really love it. In one of the interviews or one of the recent articles about your golden ornaments thing, it said that you are trying to humanize the badge, and it sounds like you're doing that in a number of ways.
It's something and that's, part of my reason why I like to do the community liaison portion of law enforcement. Officers, all the ones I've been in contact with are really a special group of people, putting themselves on the line for things that are scary and not always accepted, but we still trudge forward, and it's something special. And so for me, I think a lot of the community members or people who may have a bad idea about what law enforcement is have had bad experiences because they don't look at us as humans. They look at our uniform versus the person inside it. And so I always use that quote many times. The reason why I do a lot of my stuff for them is to humanize our badge so that people know we're here for them. We're one of them. We're parents, we're brothers, we're all kinds of things that they are. And I think this world, we're always looking for reasons why we're so different, and that things that divide us, and focus on that versus the things that really connect us and make us a great community or a great state or a great world. So that's why it's important for me to try however I can to humanize our badge.
Right. So I have one final question for you for bonus points. Okay. You live on the southern Maine coast. Beautiful place. And I don't need to tell you that there are lighthouses. There's a lot of lighthouses on the Maine coast. There's some beautiful ones near you. The Nubble Light down in York isn't far from where you are, and so forth. And up in the Portland area, there's several. So anyway, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the positive symbolism of lighthouses, but also any thoughts about the idea of what it means to be a lighthouse in the world.
When I think about a lighthouse, even as a little child, I always remember the light. I remember the light shining. And I had always said, the lighthouses mean a lot of things, but when it's stormy and it's cloudy, you always have to look for the light. And that's where the lighthouses are. The waves crashing up against them and all the scary stuff and scary storms, they're still there standing and flashing their light. So I always see it as a symbol of maybe like a leader. They're a leader in our coast. They're powerful, and it kind of brings you home too. So when you're out in the sea and you don't know where you're going, you look for the light, and that will bring you back home. And so lighthouses in the state of Maine is a big symbol. Go to any of the little trinket shops and you see lighthouses everywhere. And so for when you talk about a lighthouse, it reminds me of Maine, it reminds me of our coast, and it reminds me of home.
You think of a lighthouse out in the ocean, and obviously every lighthouse serves an important purpose, but they don't work alone. It's a network of lighthouses and aids to navigation and the buoys and all that. It's a sort of a community in a way of these aids to navigation, including the lighthouses. And it's the same thing with people. One person can't save the world, but people, if you have thousands, millions of people around the world being lighthouses for other people, then it becomes sort of similar to the aids to navigation network, if that makes sense. So it takes a lot of lighthouses to make things work well in this world. Candice Simeoni, thanks so much for talking with me today. Thank you so much for everything you do. Obviously, you're doing great work in the community, and you're a great asset for the police force there in Kennebunk. So it's a real pleasure speaking with you, and just thank you so much for being a lighthouse.
So thank you so much for this opportunity. Take care and Happy New Year.
Thanks again to Candice and the Kennebunk Police Department for being a lighthouse in the community. I read on Instagram that Candice said, quote, "I believe we are connected to each other for a reason. It takes a village," unquote. I couldn't agree more. It takes a village, or you could say it takes many lighthouses in the world. Be sure to listen in 2 weeks to the second part of my conversation with Peter Halil. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and keep a good light. I'm gonna let it shine.